Welcome to another episode of Axe of the Blood God, and independent RPG podcast. I'm your host, Kat Bailey. Joining me, as always, my lovely co-host, Nadia Oxford.
Yes, Kat, you should get a Sega Saturn. It is always morally correct.
Thank you, Nadia. I'll keep that advice under advisement. I know you're never wrong on these matters.
Nope, never. Dragon Force, come on.
Also joining me is Eric Van Allen.
Only the coolest people own a Sega Saturn. That's like known that if you meet somebody and they're like, I own a Sega Saturn, you're like, damn, this is a cool person. So become a cool
God
person.
likes them best, so
exactly.
You should hang out with them.
Dragon Force.
Are you saying I could finally be one of the cool kids? I've been wanting to do that my entire life.
All it takes is money. All it ever took was money.
All it takes is paying the Sega Corporation money, and you can be cool.
Hey, Sega's having a moment. I heard that there's a Sonic Renaissance on at the moment.
No. This happens every time. Every time a Sonic game comes out, the Sonic fans are like, oh my god, it's the Sonic game is here. Finally, we're eating good. And I'm like, look, y'all are either eating good or not eating good, but I feel like the same thing happens every time a new Sonic game comes out. Like, y'all can't always be, oh my god, Sonic's incredible now. Like, no, like Sonic's been good for a hot minute. Like, y'all are fine. It's okay. The Sonic Renaissance happened when the movie got made. Y'all got the first good video game movie.
And then the plague happened. So it was obvious that Sonic was the usher of the apocalypse, and therefore we need to love him no matter what, because otherwise he'll kill us.
Go listen to that Pantheon where we talk about the Sonic cycle and more, because we really get into the weeds on it, and it's a good time.
It's fun.
Well, we are not talking about Sonic, sadly, though we should be. Instead, we're going to be talking about another series that is finally getting an update after more than a decade. Yes, it's Dragon Age. We're doing a primer for those who maybe do not remember Dragon Age. Maybe were too young to remember when Dragon Age Inquisition came out. I'm sure that there are people listening to this podcast who are like that. In any event, we're going to kind of go through the history of the series. We're going to talk a little bit about what you need to know for Veilguard. We're going to answer some of your questions about Dragon Age. And of course, we're going to be talking about all of the big news that happened this week. We'll be talking about what we've been playing, and you'll discover in this podcast how we got to talking about the Sega Saturn and Sonic. So don't go away. But first, if you enjoy the show, we are on Patreon at patreon.com/BloodGodPod, where for just $1 a month, you can get the show ad-free, and you can get access to our Discord. Coming up this week, we are going to be doing a vote for the Pantheon, and this month's vote is going to be Musos. We're doing a Muso month, and you're like, Musos? Those aren't RPGs. Well, guess what, folks? There are Musos that are RPG adjacent. Have you ever heard of a little game called Dragon Quest Heroes? Well, you're about to find out. And so there are plenty of great Musas out there that are pretty directly tied into the RPG genre. And also, we're all playing RPGs right now. We're all playing Metaphor. We're all playing Dragon Age, probably. So we're kind of eating good at the moment. So this is a great time to take it a little bit easier, have a shot, do a chaser, play a Muso. So we'll please look forward to that vote in the coming weeks. And also make sure to check out Victor Hunter's ongoing series, Accept 11, his deep dive into Final Fantasy 11. And hey, I don't know if you know this, you're probably watching right now, but we record and stream every week on Saturdays at 9 a.m. Pacific till about 11 a.m. Pacific. And you can watch the show live on your TV. You can see all of our beautiful faces. Twitch.tv/BloodGodPod. Like and subscribe. And we do a lot of streams on there as well. Okay, let's talk about Dragon Age. In just a few days, October 31st, 2024, EA and BioWare will release Dragon Age, the Veilguard, the long-awaited continuation of the Dragon Age series, a day that in many ways, Eric, I thought we would never come. I wasn't sure that Dragon Age 4 was ever coming out. Did you keep the faith? Did you believe?
I mean, they had to eventually release something, right? Like that. They're under Electronic Arts. Like they can't just not make something. But
couldn't there have been a situation where they just straight up got closed down?
Oh yeah, I mean,
it looked like that for a while.
I mean, I feel like in this industry, even today, that's, a scary proposition for a lot of studios. I mean, you've seen what has happened with Tango and Hi-Fi Rush and stuff like that, and there's not really ever a super solid guarantee that the future of your studio is guaranteed. That's just this industry right now. But I will say for BioWare's case, like they are an institution in the RPG community. They definitely had stumbles with Anthem and to some people Andromeda. That's also, a divisive topic, whether you think Andromeda was a stumble or not. But I mean, this is also BioWare, like the same company that made, once upon a time, very different company, made Baldur's Gate, but also KOTOR, Jade Empire, and the original Dragon Age, original Mass Effect trilogy. So I think to that, like, there was always probably going to be something from them. It's just what form would it take and how much would EA shape what that was. And so we heard those reports for years about, oh, they're going to do multiplayer. It's going to be a multiplayer focused thing. And everyone who played Inquisition multiplayer was like, maybe not a great idea. Maybe. Or like, there are a lot of reports just about Strife, how it was going to get made, when it was going to get made, but it was getting made. And now we are like a week away as of the time of this recording from an actual new Dragon Age game. And I mean, I think per embargo restrictions, we can now say that I have been playing it. Can't say anything more than that, but
I also have been playing it.
Yeah. And I think that's just a wild thing to say in and of itself. But I kept the faith. It was going to happen. Just a matter of what it looks like when it got here.
Have you ever heard the Bon Jovi album, Keep the Faith? That's a real staple of the 90s. Real ripoff of Use Your Illusions. Is it? But anyway. Oh, God, yeah. We go on. Keep the faith.
Dragon Age. First released in 2009 after a period of development hell, which was a common theme for the series. Some of its key drivers include Mike Laidlaw, Mark Dara, and David Gator. There's a really great interview on Eurogamer with Mike Laidlaw by my colleague, Wesley Ian Poole, where Mike talks about kind of almost dusting off a giant heap of very confused and slightly wild design docs around this game. It did not really have a vision, shall we say. And this is, again, kind of a common theme for Dragon Age, where if I think Jason Schreier once said that if Mass Effect was run like the Starship Enterprise, then Dragon Age was more of a pirate ship, where they just kind of development was a little wild, it was a little confusing, big BioWare magic energy, that sort of thing. But it ultimately was kind of intended to be a modernized Baldur's Gate, and there's always been a little bit of a yin and yang at BioWare, at least modern BioWare, between Dragon Age, the fantasy series that ties back into its history, and Mass Effect, which is like the avatar of modern BioWare in so many ways. And I've told this story before, but Dragon Age was one of my first major assignments. I did the guide for that for OneUp.com.
Oh my god!
And our old pal Mike Nelson, who's now over at Xbox Wire, tweeted at me once that my Dragon Age guide saved Christmas, which made me feel it was a really gratifying thing.
That's really cool. I interviewed David Gator for about Dragon Age, like before the game came out, and by God, I can't remember which magazine it was, but it was a magazine. It was kind of talking about the depiction of the elves and, just the Jewish analogs there. And I remember Jason Wilson good friend of the show, saying, "Oh, you should have asked him more about his history with the Holocaust," and I'm like, and how it, because I understand like how it influenced like the story. That would have been interesting to know, but I'm like, that's kind of grim. But I think it's one of those Jew things you do, and I should have done it, and I always regret not like getting more out of that. Sorry, journalism.
David Gator, interesting guy. Very active. He hasn't been with BioWare in some years at this point. I think he left in 2016 or thereabouts, right during a pretty grim period of time for BioWare as a studio. And he's been very vocal on X/Twitter over the years. And he has lots of opinions on Dragon Age and BioWare in general. And the current state of Dragon Age and BioWare.
Sounds
there
like
was one point. At one point, he literally tweeted, "BioWare doesn't value writers the way that it used to." This was circa around the time when BioWare was working on turning Dragon Age into a co-op multiplayer game.
Yeah, I can see why
which was its own thing. So I can kind of understand his bitterness. He recently got into a really big row on Twitter. He had lots of opinions about the discourse and that's been happening on X and Twitter over the past year, to the point where I haven't checked, but he had protected his tweets last I checked. So it was a bit of a tough time for David Gator, but yeah, very notable for being extremely vocal on Twitter. Of course, Mike Laidlaw ended up leaving the company as well around the same time as David Gator and Mark Dara departed, but then he returned as a consultant. Nadia, did you ever play Dragon Age Origins?
Is that the first Dragon Age?
Yes.
I did, and I was like, and I just didn't get into it.
Meh.
Not saying I wouldn't give 4 a chance. I mean, I think one thing we're kind of planning here is that you guys are playing Dragon Age while I'm going to kind of get into Ys 10, and I don't think that's
Nadia got an Ys 10 code, folks.
I got an Ys 10 code. Sorry, I'm not talking about it today. I think we can talk about it next week, most likely. But, I don't know what it is. Like, I played Dragon Age, and it just didn't grab me, and that's actually kind of why I put off playing Skyrim, because I thought maybe I'm just not into that kind of style of Western action-adventure game. But then for some reason, Skyrim grabbed me. Oh, Eric's mad. Sorry.
Comparing, Poe, I know. We're getting to it. Dragon Age Origins and Skyrim, strange games to say one is like, oh, if I couldn't get into Skyrim, I couldn't get into Dragon Age. That's like being like, oh, I couldn't get into Ys, so I don't know if I'll get into Final Fantasy. Like, those are two very different things.
I'm not saying I'm right. It was just the feeling I had.
Okay. I was
Origins
like, that's
was more of
crazy.
it's actually much closer to Baldur's Gate 3. It was a big budget CRPG. That's what made it interesting, because there wasn't really a game like it in the years after, because the common wisdom became, games like Dragon Age Origins, you can't make that with a $100 million budget. They have to be something much smaller in scale in order to work, because they're just not a mass market. You have to turn them into an action game. And Baldur's Gate 3 really gave lie to that assumption. But Dragon Age Origins, as it was conceived, was very much as a modernized version of Baldur's Gate 2. The thing was, for Baldur's Gate fans at the time, if you can believe it, for as much love as Dragon Age Origins gets now from a certain crowd, there was a sense at the time that Dragon Age Origins was maybe a little simple. For one thing, it had a smaller party. It was really easy to become somewhat OP in that game. There was really weird difficulty spikes throughout. Magic was very overpowered in that game. You had to have a healer, basically. If you weren't a cleric, then you had to have that one lady whose name I can't remember from the Chantry. It was kind of boring.
It was Win. Yeah, you pretty much have to have Win in your party if you're not like a healer yourself. So, And like magic is pretty open-ended in Dragon Age, which is one of the things I like about it compared to say like, you know, D&D and stuff like that, is that they kind of simplified all of the archetypes of a character that you can be down to like warrior, rogue, mage, and that became kind of the paradigm for Dragon Age moving forward, was that like, okay, warrior, frontliner, you're kind of like up in the front, you can do damage, and they kind of like found interesting ways of turning that into both like your classical fighter, or, you know, maybe a paladin, or maybe into like a berserker. Reaver is what it was called in Dragon Age. And then mage kind of just had to encompass all magical casting because of the way they handle magic in Dragon Age. And then rogue is like DPS, but also thief, but also utility. Rogue is kind of a mishmash of ideas, but it's... I do think it's an interesting system, but it did mean that in Dragon Age Origins, like, you had to have a healer for some of those fights. And there was really only one person who was bringing that. So Wynn was
unless
just in
you
the
were
party.
the healer, you could be the cleric.
But
and then have everybody else.
The healer? Do you want to be the healer? No,
you could be
no.
a cool
you
badass healer.
You want to do blood magic. You want to do blood magic because blood magic's cool. I'm sorry, it's about time we said it. Like, blood magic is cool.
If blood magic is cool, come on, Dragon Age the Veilguard. Why can't I be a blood mage? What the heck? I want to be dark and cool and kind of gothic. I don't know. A thing about Dragon Age Origins was, this was kind of cool. You could pick from a variety of origins, and then you watched a whole prologue from them. And it was very ambitious. Too ambitious. Again, very common thread through Dragon Age Origins. And at the time, EA or BioWare was making the Mass Effect games. They were going to be able to carry over all the choices. They really made their bones on the choices that you could make in individual games. Having all of those origins and all those choices that you made throughout the game, too much. You could not carry that in to Dragon Age 2. Really, I mean, they let you set the world state, but they started a tradition of leaving behind the player protagonist and having a new player protagonist with each successive game. So the hero of Ferelden stayed in Origins, and he became Hawk in Dragon Age 2. And Eric is like making little gestures.
I have like
stuff.
I have so many different things to say about everything that has just been said. Sorry, this is my thing. If you listen to Normandy FM, the podcast that I co-host with Kenda Shepard, then you are well aware of, especially his distaste for the anthological nature of Dragon Age, which is each one of them. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if there's a quote out there saying as much, but it gives me the vibes of like the early days of Baldur's Gate, but also the early days of like the D&D Infinity Engine games of, we are going to take the property and do a bunch of different things with it, all kind of scattershot, all different stories within this broader world. And that was, it felt like that might have been some of the vision for Dragon Age, or at least like, you know, starting out from scratch, there was that idea of you are playing this moment in time, this story within this greater setting. Fun fact, Thedas stands for the Dragon Age setting, THEDAS. That's very fun.
Oh my
God. I always enjoy that.
Are you?
Yeah.
I did not. That is a fun fact.
Yeah.
Very fun.
So you have that, and everybody kind of feels a certain way about it. I personally put a pin in that for next week. But I think the interesting thing about the Origins is that it's something that I wish BioWare would do more often, because number one, I always love that Dragon Age lets you play different races and incorporates that into your character, because Mass Effect...
You can play a dog. I remember that.
Well, yeah, you can have a dog in your party. You cannot play a dog, but you can have a dog in your party. But like, you can be human, you can be elf, you can be Kunari, you can be dwarf, and all of those things kind of get folded into who your character is in different ways. Whereas Mass Effect was always, you are Shepard, you are the first human Spectre, etc., etc. And even with Andromeda, where they had that clean cut, they still said, well, you're going to play a human character. And I've always wanted to play an Asari, a Quarian, something like that in Mass Effect. Never really got that chance, so that's kind of a bummer. But the origin stories in DAO were pretty, like, scoped, I would say. They were very short, maybe like an hour long, but all they kind of did was serve as, like, this is your origin story. This is, like, how you got your start. And then the same guy, Duncan, would show up and be like, I'm recruiting for the Grey Wardens. And then you would end up in some sort of situation where, like, you should probably go with him because otherwise you're going to face some real bad consequences for some bad stuff that has gone down wherever your origin story was. And then those are all areas that they were already using later in the game. So, like, the Circle of Magi, the underground part, Orzammar, the city for the elves, if you're a city elf. Those all kind of get, like, kind of tied in later. Depending on what origin you pick, they're a little bit more tied in. Like, if you're a human noble, that ends up being, like, a very important thing at one point in the story. If you're a city elf, that maybe, like, gets called out once or twice, but it's not a huge deal. Like, you kind of get, like, a tie-off near the end of the game, but it's not, like, a huge thing. I thought it was a great system. I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm kind of sad that they have never really gone back to it because I loved having those individualized stories that just end up being like a little, like, you get your own one-on-one session before the big campaign starts of, like, how does your character end up here? And I think that works super well. I wish they would do more of that.
A few funny aspects of Dragon Age. One, notably, this game came out just a few months before the debut of Game of Thrones on HBO. Was it 2010 or 2012? I think it had to have been 2010 because my friends were still living here. 2010-ish, 2011-ish. And the reason I mention this is Dragon Age Origins lifts so much from A Song in Ice and Fire, it's not even funny. They just wholesale rip off the Night's Watch and the Watchers on the Wall and all that. It's hilarious.
Like
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. It is, and I love the Grey Wardens. I think they're one of my favorite factions in Dragon Age, but I think they do something cool with the idea of that sort of faction, but they are definitely very Night's Watchy, especially in that first game. Oof. And
aesthetically, they really rip off the aesthetic at that time, which was Lord of the Rings was still very popular. When you go into the deep roads and you're fighting the Darkspawn, big Mines of Moria, circa Fellowship of the Ring energy, down to the music and everything. But of course, it's 2009, and this is EA, and so everything has to be covered in blood. Everybody is blood spattered all the time from combat. Really gross aesthetic. Not a big fan of that whole look. I'm kind of glad that they moved away from the blood.
From the blood.
I mean, they kind of did. Dragon Age 2 was probably the bloodiest, but I still think Dragon Age, even from what we played at the preview, was, like, pretty violent at times. There are takedowns in that preview we played of Veilguard that were like, wow, they still have an M rating, that's for sure. So I don't think they completely got past it, but
no, there's definitely blood in this one. Actually, there's a story. I feel like I'm kind of doing my book report, and I get to show my work from all the research that I did over X amount of time.
Art Simpson book report. Like, this is a book about pirates with
yes.
on their shoulders.
Apparently, the studio GM of BioWare, Gary McKay, who, if you meet him, he's a very mild-mannered guy, very Canadian, wears a plaid button-up shirt, loves hockey, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's all right.
But apparently he loves blood and is known as the more blood guy at BioWare. And we'll just keep going, but can we make this, can we punch this up? Can we make this scene more violent? Why isn't that person bleeding out? Can we make this a little grosser?
Why aren't they playing hockey?
in a vacuum, the idea of just a big fan of blood, you know, great substance, love it, fantastic.
Just love blood, eh?
Keeps us alive, you know. Shout outs to blood.
Shout out to blood.
Big fan of blood. Also notably, a little game came out a few months after Dragon Age Origins. A seminal game, one of the defining games of BioWare. If you can believe this, I think that Dragon Age Origins came out in November. Mass Effect 2 came out in February 2010. Immediately goes on to sell like 2 million units. Big success. It's a straight up third-person action adventure game. It did away with most of the RPG mechanics of Mass Effect. Had all the storytelling aspects still in there. But it was a huge sea change for BioWare. And it had a big impact on Dragon Age.
Yeah, I mean, this is the moment, I think, that a lot of people in hindsight go back and look at, because there's always the question of Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age 2. Like, what happened? Because Dragon Age 2, infamously, much more action-focused, way more like you are doing combat, you're doing attacks, you're not hitting pause, there's no pause on the blood. It was a lot more active. I also personally I like playing rogue. I like playing a roguish hawk, both in personality and as a class. And I feel like when you play dual dagger rogue in Dragon Age 2, you are just killing things. That is what you are doing. That entire game is just eviscerating everything around you. And it feels good, IMO. But it was definitely a departure in a lot of ways, I would say, from Origins being a much more, at times, methodical pause, move your characters around, kind of deal with some stuff.
Pause, right?
Yeah. It certainly still had the ability to do that, but it felt de-emphasized. And I think that is where a lot of people like to pinpoint as oh, something changed. EA changed BioWare. But I think BioWare also changed BioWare. I do think that there was, on some level, because Mass Effect to Mass Effect 2 was a similar change. Mass Effect 1 is a pretty markedly different kind of shooter kind of game from Mass Effect 2 and 3. Mass Effect 2 and 3 are cover shooters. They are action games with light RPG elements that do make it an RPG. We're not starting that counter again. But it is much more
too late. We reset the counter.
It's got so much more DNA in there from games of the time. I've even heard you go pay attention to what was happening at the time in the industry at large. You have games like Uncharted, Gears of War, like cover shooters third-person cover shooters were big at the time. And so there was a broader shift to a more action-focused side of the industry. And so I think that Dragon Age 2 ends up reflecting not just a change in broader industry trends or even a change coming down from on high. It was also just a change in the way that RPGs were being thought of at the time. Dragon Age 2, often much maligned, but I am a noted defender of Dragon Age 2. I like that game. I think it's good. Warts and all. So, yeah. Shout outs to Dragon Age 2.
Shout out to Dragon Age Blood and 2.
When I'm looking at the notes for Dragon Age, I think about how my entire career arc is sort of encompassed by Dragon Age. So somewhere deep in the archives of the internet is maybe a preview that I wrote for OneUp.com where I actually got to preview Dragon Age 2, and I went down to Redwood Shores, and Mike Laidlaw was there giving me the demo and explaining the action system to me for the first time. And my memories are very hazy of this time. It was a long time ago, but I do remember thinking, Rogue might be fun to play this time around, because Rogue was not that fun to play in Dragon Age Origins. If one class had to go in Origins, you needed your tank. So Alistair, get in here. You needed a mage, Morrigan, get in here. Mm-hmm. You need a healer, Wynn, get in here. And then it's one other probably another offensive tank, because otherwise your party could be really squishy. And so I think my character was playing not a sword and board, but a two-handed,
like a reaver
attacker. And you could, I think you could do some interesting things with rogue in that particular party slot, but it felt hard. It felt pretty tough to integrate a rogue into that party setup. So in Dragon Age 2, I was playing as a rogue. Interesting setup. Nadia, you know what Dragon Age 2 reminds me of?
What's that?
A little game called Dragon Quest V.
Huh.
Okay, but can you tame a saber cat? Because that's
no. Dragon Quest V is definitively the better game.
That's fair.
Out of the two.
That's fair.
The main reason that they remind me of each other is they're both take place over a long period of time.
Right.
Where there are time jumps throughout. So Dragon Quest V is like 25-year span or something like that. It's a pretty long span.
Yeah, it is.
You're in slavery for like 10 years.
You're in slavery for 10 years, and then you kind of go through this incident where you're a stone statue and you miss your kids growing up.
Side note, some of the darkest stuff I've ever seen in RPG. Anyway, you were enslaved for 10 years.
Yeah.
Oh, but side note, you were an effing statue for 10 years. Your kids grew up without you.
We're getting into spoiler territory here. I'm not saying that DQ5 is going to be the next game for the retro
What's the statute of limitations on DQ5?
Yeah.
Play DQ5, everybody. Just saying.
And more importantly, put DQ5 from the DS onto the Switch. I think this is a very important issue that everyone should vote on.
Do not think of this as me spoiling you. Think of this as a tantalizing taste of how amazing Dragon Quest V is and why you should play it.
I'm on board with that. All right, yeah.
Dragon Age 2, also a time skip, 10 years. Really interesting swings with it. An examination of one city as opposed to an entire world. A city that has a lot of different problems. I think this is the game that introduced the Canary more seriously.
No. Yeah, you had Sten in Origins, and you had, like, lore tidbits, but this was the one where you are dealing with the Canary, because Kirkwall is, if I have my geography right, it's kind of... So most of Dragon Age 1 took place in southern Thedas, specifically in the eastern part that I can't remember the name of all of a sudden. Not Orlais, but the other. Ferelden, that's it. Ferelden. Orlais, they're kind of over there. They're doing stuff. We'll see them in Inquisition. But then you have kind of some ocean, some water and stuff. And Kirkwall is kind of on that border between southern Thedas and northern Thedas, which is where, like, the Tevinter... Imperium is, that's where the Canary are, that's where Antiva is. There's a lot of stuff up there where we've seen characters from there. Veilguard is notable because it's taking place in Northern Thedas, but like Kirkwall was kind of them going up there, and yeah, like you said, it was a game set entirely in one city, which I haven't seen a lot of RPGs do. The only like other ones that come to mind are like some cyberpunk ones, like obviously Cyberpunk and Deus Ex and stuff like that, but largely like it taking place in one city over a long span of time was a really cool and interesting thing.
I loved it when it came out. Warts and all. I liked the characters. I didn't even mind going to the same basement in a warehouse over and over and over again for a fairly simple quest. And the first two acts rule.
Yes.
In Dragon Age 2. It's the third act where it completely falls apart. The main choices are not particularly interesting. The story really goes off the rails. And that's a function of the fact that Dragon Age 2 was made in a span of about 14 to 16 months.
Dang.
Huge crunch conditions. It was not a healthy development process, which, again, very common thread for the Dragon Age series. And I mean, Eric, I think we can both agree that Dragon Age 2 is not a boring game, but it was really impacted by the circumstances of its development.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you fight in the same, cave outside the city, mansion inside the city, basement inside the city. Like, you kind of have repeating dungeons was one of the biggest marks against it. But I think obviously the time skips and kind of the way you move up in the city. I've always loved how it uses the time to not only show how the city changes, but also to show how Hawk kind of rises there. I also love having Hawk as a character. I thought this was like a great idea of having this named protagonist. You give them kind of a moniker, and they have somewhat of a defined story coming in that you can still do a lot with to kind of like manipulate and have it feel like your own. It was very similar to having a shepherd. So like having a Hawk was very good. And it was where I'll forgive them for making me play as a human instead of playing other characters. I say all this stuff, but chances are I'll probably roll a human in Veilguard. But it's I think Hawk is super interesting as a character because you see them rise over time, and then you have Varric introduced, and Varric quickly becomes a like series favorite, kind of becomes the Garrus for Dragon Age, and the framing they have for it, I love the framing of like Varric being interrogated, and you're kind of trying to figure out what's going on.
Dragon Age.
Yes, yeah, I will say that with my whole chest. Yeah.
What makes him the Garrus of Dragon Age?
He's your buddy. He's your pal. He's always there. He's hanging out. He's got a sick gun, and when you show up, you're like, that's him.
He's in all of them now.
That's my bud.
If you see,
I like that he's the unreliable narrator for the entire saga.
Oh yeah.
He's just around. He's always around.
If you see a character walk into a room and you're like, who let this guy in here? That's your Garrus. That's your Varric. That's that guy.
Big dad energy from Varric in general. Delightful character. Real highlight of Dragon Age in general. And there are several characters that I think are really defining. Varric is one of them. Morrigan is another one. She's a goth witch lady.
Yeah, I met her when I played.
Speaking of spoilers, way back in the day, I think I was doing an early active time babble.
Oh boy.
Go back and listen to our Dragon Age Origins review roundtable.
Oh my god.
In which, I think in the course of that podcast, I spoiled the nature of Morrigan's mother.
Oh, Flemeth?
Yeah. I spoiled the nature of Flemeth, played by the great Kate Mulgrew, by the way.
It's a witch in the woods, though. Like, that's
I got some crap for that one.
Oh,
I got
whatever.
some crap for that one. Yeah.
That's silly.
Fans were mad at me.
As long as like there's like that part of it, but if you don't spoil the other part of it, like you're fine. But
also there was a plot thread introduced in Origins that was it ever resolved with Morrigan?
Well, with Flemeth?
Talking about the demon baby.
Oh, the
was
demon baby.
Was that ever resolved?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, in Inquisition? Was it in
Inquisition?
Resolved in Trespasser?
Yeah, in Inquisition, if you imported from the keep a save that was like, like the Grey Warden had the demon baby with Morrigan, then she shows up with that kid in Inquisition, and you can talk to him and stuff.
Hello, demon baby.
It's pretty fascinating, honestly. Like I
you're
think,
a demon baby. How's that working out for you?
People like Trespasser. Dragon Age had really good DLC in general. Origins had Awakening, which is a whole game. You know,
Origins
like Awakening
had a lot of DLC. To be like a lot of DLC, and some of it was really
Awakening
good.
was really good.
Awakening, I would even say that like Awakening, it's not quite like a separate game. We had this discussion when we did the BioWare
1.5. It's like a sequel practically.
Yeah, it's like an expansion pack almost. But also like Dragon Age Origins had the DLC that added Shale, the DLC that added there was another party member that I can't remember the name of all of a sudden. But I think there was one other DLC party member. There was the one that did resolve the Morgan stuff and kind of like set up her leaving the party and kind of going to do her own thing. Great DLC. I thought it was really good. There's the Darkspawn Chronicles where you play as Darkspawn. Yeah, which is crazy. Like there was a lot of extra content for that game, and then Awakening, and then it all kind of got bundled up into one big package. And I think that's how a lot of people ended up experiencing that game, was getting that like Ultimate Edition or whatever. But eventually, I think, especially once Dragon Age 2 rolled around and they were like, DLC needs to be a bit meatier, and you kind of fell into what BioWare was doing at the time, where you have like one kind of combat focused, quote unquote, DLC, and then one story focused DLC. And so you had that with DA2, and then Inquisition only got Trespasser. I think there was maybe some other DLC, and also bears mentioning that BioWare was also doing, especially around 2 and Inquisition, a lot of cosmetic DLC. Mass Effect 3 was infamous for being one of the first loot box games, but like there was also the Crimson Armor DLC and stuff like that for Dragon Age.
$10.
Yeah. So
around that time, that was more Inquisition though, I think. But
yes,
EA was nickel and diming you any way they could around this time.
Yeah, and so that was kind of caught up in all this. But I think like Trespasser is, I would say that there are very few DLCs in the history of games that I would put on the tier of Trespasser. Like I think you got to be like a Witcher 3 DLC to like be on that tier. Like Trespasser is an extremely good piece of additional content and a really incredible epilogue for that game.
So is Leliana's song was also very good, very additive to Dragon Age 2, and also features one of the best characters in Dragon Age, Leliana. Bard, spy master, all around cool lady. I like that in this universe, even though they tend to be kind of loose with where the threads of the story that they pick up, it's more of an anthology, as you were mentioning. But you have these recurring characters, all of whom are quite rich and extend a long way back in BioWare's history. And there's real BioWare history, real BioWare heritage in characters like Leliana, Morrigan, Varric, and now Solus, the formerly titular Dreadwolf.
The egg.
Who I discovered that, and I'm kind of amazed I didn't know this, but Dragon Age, specifically Inquisition, but Dragon Age in general, has a very large female fandom, and Solus is a big part of it.
yeah, I have numerous female friends who are absolutely in love with Dragon Age.
My sister is in love with Solus, my younger sister. She was like, oh, I've written many a fic when it comes to Solus.
Most of them are rated E, and not for everyone. This is E by the AO3 standards.
So in
E for explicit.
Inquisition, Solus is a party member. He's an elf. He's bald. A little bit Spock energy. Spock is also infamously huge female fandom with Spock.
Yeah.
Defining features of Solus: elf, bald.
That's the first thing that I see.
You're so right for it. It's just very funny. That's like, what are his defining characteristics? What do you know him as? Elf, bald.
So if he's like an elf supremacist, and he's like, elves are the best, and it's like, hey, Baldy, you look stupid. Like, that would just tear him right down. The game would be over.
He looks like the villain from Star Trek Nemesis.
I feel like this
movie that was very bad, but also had a bald, but in this case, Romulan villain. Who's also partly a clone of Captain Picard. Star Trek got really dumb at a certain point, so...
I feel like the statute of limitations has to be up on talking about Solus, because obviously Solus plays a really big part of this game. Yeah, but like that's like saying, like, spoiler alert, Darth Vader is Luke's dad. Like, that's...
How dare you?
Like,
Solus is...
we have to cross that bridge to discuss the things that are going to happen.
He was heavily promoted as a key antagonist
yes,
in Dragon Age: The Veilguard. We'll say that much. Yeah.
Yeah, so Solus was, I think at the time, a pretty interesting reveal, because like it's literally like the very end of Inquisition is when you find out like, oh, this character was like up to some stuff this entire time, and you find out like who they actually are, and they're Fen'Harel, the Dread Wolf, which is why that game was originally going to be called Dragon Age: The Dread Wolf. And then Solus was kind of like primed through Trespasser to be like, oh, this is the next major antagonist, which like there is some history in Dragon Age of doing that, specifically having Dragon Age 2 set up Corypheus, which Corypheus then became the villain of Inquisition. It is an interesting choice, I will say, because obviously we are playing as Rook in Veilguard, and not the Inquisitor, who is, depending on how you played Inquisition, very much involved with the conflict with Solus. But considering that the Veilguard is also kind of taking the Solus conflict and twisting it and changing it a little bit, and that was kind of the reason behind the name change, I think that's overall maybe just a sign of a pivot from a plan that was laid out before. But
they changed the name because they didn't want everybody to assume that Solus was the centerpiece of this game,
right?
Because he's not,
right? Because we can say it was in like the previews and stuff that like it's about the Elven gods. It's about like the reason why.
It's about the Veilguard.
Lore time. There's a thing in Dragon Age called the Veil. It's what separates the real world from the magic world, where the demons are. I love demons in Dragon Age. They're always up to some shit. They all are always named after like particular vices or emotions. So you have like justice, compassion, pride, and spite. Like there's some great ones in there. But the Veil was, as we learned in Inquisition, created as a way to kind of like control the elven gods who the Dreadwolf was rebelling against. And so in the Veilguard, the Veil is kind of in play again, and we're dealing with a lot of that stuff. So I think that's really fascinating and interesting, and it makes Solus really an interesting character because of that. We get this like really central character to all this. I think like Loki is not an unkind comparison for Solus, but
Loki from the MCU.
I think if you like Solus like that, if you're writing that E for explicit fic about Solus, you're also like primed and ready for Loki. Like I think that Venn diagram might be a circle. You know what I'm saying?
Nadia, did you ever play Dragon Age Inquisition?
No, I have not.
This is big your stuff right here.
It might
Solus
be.
And everything.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's not like there's so many great villains out there. It's like, well, who has room for one more? I guess I have to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we somehow have been already talking about this for 45 minutes, and we've barely touched on Inquisition. But so I'll try and TLDR it a little bit. Dragon Age Inquisition, again, extremely difficult development. They shifted over to Frostbite, caused a huge amount of problems. Some seriously harrowing crunch. It's detailed. There's a lot of detail in Schreier's book, one of Jason Schreier's book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, I think it is. And it nevertheless won many Game of the Years, but then suffered some pretty tough comps to Witcher 3. And there's this thing in Inquisition, it's called the Hinterlands, and it's this opening area, huge, lots to discover, too huge, in fact. People were getting lost in it for hours and hours and hours and getting bored and quitting. And it became the Hinterlands problem.
The Hinterlands.
It was compared a lot to White Orchard, which was the tutorial area of Witcher 3. And so since then, BioWare has been thinking to itself, how can we not do the Hinterlands again? And when they were making the first draft of Veilguard, and I call it the first draft because it really was a first draft, it got canceled, was originally a much smaller scale exploration. You're in the Tinvinter Imperium, and it's a cloak and dagger kind of spy RPG. And it really takes the very large scope of Dragon Age Inquisition. That was a big game. Big game.
Huge game.
Totally different art style from Origins. They changed a lot from that time. and made it much smaller. And by all accounts, BioWare was really excited about this game. But as we all know, it was not a happy time for BioWare between 2024 and like 2020, between Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, various other stuff. The team kept getting pulled off projects, having to work on Mass Effect Andromeda and such, and the original version of Dragon Age Dreadwolf, Dragon Age 4, was canceled. And then when they rebooted it, it was as a co-op RPG. And EA takes a lot of the blame for this, and maybe there was a culture within EA that fostered this idea that you need to make a multiplayer game so that you could have your own freaking Ultimate Team characters and sell skins and such.
Oh, God.
But I can tell you that idea came from within BioWare. BioWare was much more... BioWare were the ones driving this. BioWare controlled their own destiny. It was originally driven by Mark Dara, Matt Goldman, and frankly, it went nowhere. Apparently, it was really bad. No disrespect to the people who were working on it. And the studio was, and the project was really spinning its wheels until 2020. And there's a real chance that this game never comes out. Or it comes out in just an unfathomably bad state. And so I've said it over and over again, Dragon Age the Veilguard is a miracle. It should not have come out. Not in this state.
Yeah.
Not in this state.
Just knowing and hearing the tittle tattle in the background, how troubled it was, and when I heard it's coming out and it's very good, I was like, someone must have made a deal with God or the devil, because that was not going to happen in this reality.
I think that was the takeaway from the preview, and a lot of people had this takeaway, and I say whatever you want about that, but I do think it was genuinely surprising for everyone at that event, because everyone just kept saying that's a BioWare game. That's a BioWare game. They made a BioWare game. And I know it sounds weird to just say that over and over again, but coming off of years of Anthem kind of being in whatever state it was in, like you were saying, Andromeda, which by all accounts was a BioWare game, but was an open world BioWare game, was a even people who like Andromeda will readily admit that a lot of that stuff around the planet restoration and the way quests were formed and stuff was very open world, almost like Ubisoft-y in a way. And so having this game that really rekindled feelings of a Mass Effect even, or an early Dragon Age, was kind of amazing. And it was kind of crazy. And to have that be the takeaway is exciting, I think. So... it is frankly a miracle that the game came out, but also that the game is what it is, that it doesn't exactly, from our preview session, it wasn't just this we kind of tried to figure out, what we could salvage out of this. We've played games. I mean, us working in the media, we've played games that feel you had an idea for something and it kind of turned into something else. If they're doing that, they're hiding the cuts pretty well. So, yeah.
The arc of Dragon Age, I said it's the arc of my career. It's also the arc of BioWare. Dragon Age Origins was a bridge game that was a CRPG that connected directly back to Baldur's Gate 2. And then it became progressively more action-oriented. There was that grim period in the 2010s where BioWare was stuck kind of wandering in the wilderness and had forgotten what its identity was. And Dragon Age, and that was not coincidentally the time between we last saw a Dragon Age game. And now BioWare, in so many ways, is getting back to basics, getting back to what it knows itself to be, which is a RPG studio, a CRPG studio, admittedly an action RPG studio. And it's a relief to see this game coming out. I asked our listeners, we're doing a Dragon Age primer, do you have any questions? And I think JB asked a pertinent question, and I'll put it to you two. Does Dragon Age still have interest in a post-Baldur's Gate world, or will we collectively file it in the Final Fantasy 16 bin in 3 months' time?
The 16 bin?
The FF16 bin, I think they're suggesting that Final Fantasy 16 came out, It got very good reviews, and it disappointed in the sales department. It sold, I think, around 3 million units. It did not live up to the Square Enix specifically called it kind of a disappointment in that regard. There's mixed feelings within it within the community, where people are like, it's good, kind of an action game. I would like to. It got a little overshadowed by Rebirth, arguably. And please don't yell at me, Nadia. Sorry, I don't mean to come in. I am just enjoying my games, but I think I'm just saying that's what they mean. I think that's what they mean when they say that.
I will briefly say that FF16 has its defenders and has its critics. That's well known. We don't need to litigate that in the Dragon Age podcast, but also, like, Dragon Age having a simultaneous launch on PC and consoles is probably going to help it, where that only really hurt 16. So that's my hot take on that, is that, like, 16 coming out way later on PC, I think ultimately hurt it. Square Enix has been out there saying, like, we really need to consider PC launches moving forward and stuff like that. I think there's some lessons learned there, maybe. East 10 Nordics was, like, on the Steam top sellers list for me the other day, and I'm like, that's an Ys game that's in the top sellers on Steam. It's because, you know what, it's coming out on PC, and I think you just got to put games on PC nowadays. Everybody's got a PC these days. But does Dragon Age still have interest in a post-Baldur's Gate world is a really interesting question, because I think no matter what, it is going to draw comparisons. Whether because it is a fantasy RPG, whether it is because there's a lineage there, whether because like it's a companion focused game, and like Baldur's Gate did really, in my opinion, draw on the ideas of BioWare to develop some of that stuff in ways that Larian had companion stuff before, but definitely not in the way that they had in Baldur's Gate 3. I think that was a major difference between, say, DOS 2 and BG3 for them. So I think it is going to draw comparisons, and people will start to feel a certain way. But I think it's also really important to note that these are two pretty structurally different games at the end of the day. They have similar settings, they have similar ideas, but one is a tactical turn-based RPG, which itself is very different from its own lineage. Baldur's Gate 3 is very different from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 when you break it down that far. It's not an action with real-time pause. And so you look at Dragon Age, which at this point, like, that's an action RPG series, I'd say, with light tactical elements, but definitely like more on the action side of things. You're hitting buttons, you're dodging stuff, you're applying and detonating things and putting down all these things that go boom and stuff like that. Like, it's a little bit more involved. And so I think comparisons can be drawn, but, you know, be wary of which ones are in good faith and bad faith, you know? But I do think people care about Dragon Age. I think that in and of itself, big time. We were talking about earlier, like the eggheads are going to ride for this game. Like, y'all aren't ready for social media when a Dragon Age game comes out. We haven't known what it looks like for too long. It's like the Blight, you know? It's like the Blight when the Darkspawn come through. Y'all, it's been too long since the last Blight. Y'all aren't prepared for it. You're a summer child.
I have friends who are, like, definitely Dragon Age faithful, and they have been waiting for this for a very long time. And I think,
and that's the difference between 16 and Dragon Age. I think is Dragon Age is a continuation, and 16 is a standalone game. And yeah, it has Ben Starr and a very cute pup, but it just can't have the same level of investment of people who've been playing this series for 15 years.
There are people who were raised in, like, born in the darkness of Tumblr, who are ready, who have had so many arguments about Anders that you have never even heard about before. You might be saying to yourself right now, who is Anders? We didn't even talk about Anders here. You're going to know who Anders is by the time this game comes out.
You sure are.
Oh.
I think it's an interesting question to say, in the years since Dragon Age Inquisition, I do think you can argue that CD Projekt and Larian have both out-BioWared BioWare and taken everything that BioWare does really, really well specifically the storytelling and the characters and the romantic arcs, and executed on them in a very, very, very high level. CD Projekt did it from the action adventure standpoint, and Larian did it from the classic CRPG standpoint. And I did actually talk to BioWare quite a bit. So I wrote a story for IGN, how BioWare finally got Dragon Age to the finish line after a tumultuous decade, and I quizzed them a lot on Baldur's Gate 3. So what does Dragon Age mean in a world where Baldur's Gate 3 exists? And I wrote that BioWare's reaction was kind of to treat it as a net positive, with Mark Darrow saying, yeah, I didn't really feel that earthquake in terms of people being worried about it. I think what I saw last year more than anything was a renaissance in the RPG genre. Last year was arguably the strongest year we've ever seen in terms of RPGs. Not only do we have Baldur's Gate 3, we had Hogwarts, we had Starfield, we had tons of RPGs coming out last year that covered a really wide swath. And then he added, I think it silenced some of the naysayers. It didn't cause a massive shift in the way that Veilguard was being developed, but I think it made some people who maybe were thinking, well, we should really be making action games because action games sell 10 million copies and RPGs sell 6 million copies, and silence those voices. By the way, those some people would be EA. EA going, why don't you just make an action game? Action games sell 10 million copies. And so for BioWare, it was sort of what's the word? It showed that, hey, you can point to this and say, hey, RPGs can do really well.
Yeah, example.
RPGs are really popular. The nerdier, maybe the better. Another question is from Salarn, who says, books, anime, Netflix show, mobile games, amusement park rides, comics. What supplemental materials outside the main series have you enjoyed or recommend?
There's an amusement park ride?
Eric, have you...
I didn't know about the amusement park ride.
I think he's kind of referring to the...
I think that's a joke, maybe.
I think that's a joke, but I'd go on a Dragon Age amusement park.
I'd love
ride.
Yeah. I'd ride the, what would you call it? Like the Thetis
The
coaster
Grey
or something?
Warden.
Yeah.
You just puke on it.
yeah, the Grey Warden. That's not a bad name. That's like a Six Flags ride, right? Like it's like
exactly.
a nondescript like steel coaster that they just kind of slap some Dragon Age stuff onto.
Put a dragon
Did you
on
read?
it.
Did you ever watch the anime, Eric?
No, I didn't, and I probably should because I feel like there's probably going to be some stuff from it that pops up in Veilguard because I think the series takes place in Tevinter, and I have read some supplemental material. It's all fine. I'd say like Tevinter Nights is probably the one you want to read if you're going to read something going into Veilguard, because that's also Tevinter. And Tevinter is a place we've heard about before, but we've not really had a ton of stuff like set in Tevinter. Obviously, all the games did not go to Tevinter. So this is like kind of a good way to like prep yourself and get in a little bit, get an idea of what that world is like before you see it in Veilguard. Yeah, we talked about it at the beginning, but like Dragon Age being kind of like analogous to D&D in the way it like handles its setting and its world, the way that like you kind of have the Dragon Age setting and then everybody kind of does stories in it, does different kind of takes on it. There is a lot of stuff out there if you want to dig into it. I don't really have any like stay away from this. I think Ken could probably speak better to some of this because I think he's delved deeper into the Dragon Age stuff. I've really mostly stayed around the Mass Effect realm, watching the Mass Effect movie and reading the Mass Effect book and stuff like that. But it's hard to go wrong, I think, especially if all you want is more Dragon Age. I think if you are just looking for something to read, you might be a little lost, but I do think that if you just want more Dragon Age, there is more Dragon Age out there. There's like an online short or something with Felicia Day at one point, right? Because that became a tie-in for the DLC.
I think so.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
That was that era, right?
Back when Felicia Day was having a
Wizard
moment.
on the Moon era.
Because Mass Effect 3 also had an online personality in it as a character too, right? Who was it? Wow, I'm bad at this. Mass Effect
The year was 2012.
It was Jessica Chobot. That's who was in Mass Effect 3.
Oh my god, really?
Jessica.
Yeah, that era.
2013.
Where like online personalities were appearing in games. Granted, that hasn't really stopped.
I mean, they're still happening.
Yeah, we had like YouTubers in Cyberpunk and stuff like
Jeff
that.
Jeff Keighley showing up in Death Stranding.
I have
used
heard
to write articles alongside Chobot. Yeah.
I have heard Vows and Vengeance. It's like a podcast series, I believe, which is also kind of a lead-in into Veilguard, is supposed to be pretty good. Ken was telling me the other day that he was listening to it. It gets very good. If you need more podcasts in your life, first listen to everything we do, and then go listen to everything Normandy FM, and then go listen to Vows and Vengeance.
There's a hierarchy.
Nadia, I don't know if you're ever going to get around to Dragon Age, but I think Dragon Age the Veilguard would kind of be your jam.
I'll tell you what I would get into. There is a Dragon Age roller coaster in Dubai. It's called Flight of the Wardens.
What?
Look in the Stars of Destiny live chat. Criminal Justice just posted it.
A new Patreon tier. How do we get the Blood God to Dubai to ride the Dragon Age coaster?
Wow.
And record a podcast
sand
on
while
it.
I'm there as an extra incentive.
Oh, it's apparently in the UK now.
Okay, that's even easier.
Much easier to get to. Perfect.
We will record a podcast live on the roller coaster.
We will. And I'll puke because I'm not good with roller coasters, but I'm going to go on it anyway. I love don't get me wrong, I love roller coasters, but as you get older, you can't ride it anymore.
It's a robo coaster? What is a robo coaster?
A robo coaster?
That's not a word. You made that up.
They play Robo's theme while you ride it.
Oh, is this like where you sit in a seat and there's like a screen or something and you're kind of like jostling?
Are boring.
Yeah.
That's like we had that in Canada's Wonderland. It was called Days of Thunder, and then they replaced it with some SpongeBob thing.
Well, I think that's a great note to end this conversation on. We're going to be reviewing Dragon Age the Veilguard. The embargo lifts this coming week. The game is out on the 31st. People will be playing it by the time we have our RPG chat. IGN reviewer Liana Hafer, friend of the podcast, will be on with us on Saturday on twitch.tv/bloodgodpod to review it for the podcast. So please look forward to it. Okay, it's time now for a series of random encounters. Netflix has closed its AAA internal studio led by Halo creative head Joseph Staten.
Good job, everyone.
Mario & Luigi Brothership's developer has been revealed, and it's a surprise. It's acquired the developers of Octopath Traveler.
Nice.
Interesting.
I can deal with that. What if you had like a really dark Mario & Luigi game then? Like, can you imagine with like the Poison Rain plotline in Octopath 2? That'd be amazing.
Mario,
I don't trust the church no more.
It's a raining acid, Mario.
I would play a Mario RPG that's in the Saga/Octopath Traveler kind of format where you have a lot of individual stories focused around, this is the Bowser series, this is the Toad series, this is the Peach story, this is the Daisy story.
I have to give them credit. They give Bowser Jr. a lot of attention. I like Bowser Jr.
No,
I think
what?
He's a
you
dick.
Like Bowser Jr.?
In the
Bowser Jr.'s fun.
The game that nobody played, the remake of Bowser's Inside Story, had a great side story with him, and just him being a brat and him being abandoned one by one by the original Koopa kids, except for Morton, who's like, I like small Bowser. It's a very, very cute little story, and I don't know. To me, it redeemed Bowser Jr. because he knows no one likes him, but he does his best.
Koopaling's ride or die. I just don't like his little handkerchief with the mouth. It looks dumb. Though I did like the time that his dad died and he revived him into a horror zombie creature.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. He took his bones and threw them into like a potion.
Yeah, that sure was a thing. Vault 13, the ambitious remake of Fallout 1 and Fallout 4's engine, has been canceled to prioritize the well-being of project members. Meanwhile, Fallout London is closing in on 1 million downloads. I think it actually surpassed it. Congratulations to Fallout London.
Yeah.
Monster Hunter Wilds is having an open beta this week. 2 hunts, the Chatakabara and the Doshiguma. I can never pronounce these names. And the character creator will be available. progress will carry over. The testing is on the PS5 on Monday through Wednesday, and then all platforms on Thursday through Sunday. You should play it. Monster Hunter rules. I will be playing it and trying out all the different weapons with a couple of different groups. I'm extremely excited about this. The only thing that bums me out is that if I want to jump into it right away, I need to play on PS5, but I really want to play it on Steam. And for some reason, cross save is still not a freaking thing with this series. So the progress that I have from the open beta will not carry over, and I'll have to start over again.
Yeah, I do play on. I don't know if I'll have time to do this. I'd like to, but I would definitely be playing on the PS5.
Yeah, I'm playing.
Excellent. I look forward to your thoughts. I'll check in with y'all next week. Hey, Nadia, this is for you. A new Final Fantasy VII glitch lets players save Aerith and shave off 2 hours. At long last,
Finally,
rumors are true. You can save Aerith.
We have a use for that ultimate weapon that you can get for her in the Wall Market, because you could get you would get it later in the game when she was already dead. Spoilers. So, yeah, I guess they finally put it in her hands. Congratulations, Aerith, on being Jesus.
You can force her to witness her own death.
That's crazy.
That's an interesting thing to do.
By the way, spoiler alert.
I think she'd find that very interesting.
I think she would, actually. I think she would find that pretty interesting. Yeah. And finally, Blizzard is selling, which just really tells you about the state of the games industry right now. Blizzard is selling a $90 mount in World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft fans going, it's a bargain! And then talking to themselves, how can you not buy this mount? I mean, it came from this one expansion, and it would have cost like $500.
So really, you're
originally,
just saving
but
money
now you
by
can get it for
buying
just $90.
What is it?
You'd be an idiot not to. I don't know.
As a lapsed Dota fan, let me tell y'all, you could sell anything to these fans. You really could. you could. And as someone who has been there, all I'm gonna tell y'all out there is you don't need it, because one day you will stop playing this game and you will be like, why do I have that skin?
Is it like God and you ride on his shoulders and that's your mount? That might be worth the money.
No,
like
it's
Hot
just
Rama?
like a dinosaur.
If it's Hot Rama, then I get it.
Little dinosaur with like gold. There was a website
dinosaur.
that was titled "How to See If Your Husband Bought the $90 Mount in World of Warcraft."
I mean, it's a nice mount, but I wouldn't pay $90 for it.
There are people who have been playing World of Warcraft for 20 years, so I don't know. Having a $90 mount is cool for them. I think about, so I dropped like $200 on Fire Emblem Heroes, and I think about that sometimes, where I had a ton of amazing JPEGs playing
JPEGs.
in my party. I spent so much money on those JPEGs, and I only spent $200. There were people who were spending $200 a poll, $500 a poll. There were memes about you could buy a new phone or you could buy a character in Fire Emblem Heroes. Choose wisely. That's the state of video games right now. But I'm not going to shame anybody who wants their $90 mount. Like, more power to you. The world's on fire. The election's in a week. Just go buy your $90 dinosaur mount. Who cares?
We're spiraling. Pull up.
All right. Let's get into a little cozier territory. We're running out of time, but we're gonna ride into the tavern. We're gonna chill out and relax by the fire. I'm gonna wrap ourselves up in a blanket. And I will start by saying, my friends, I'm in a mood right now. I don't know what happened, but one day I just was like, you know what? It's about time that I mod my 3DS. Oh my God. Scandal. I'm going to mod my 3DS. It's about time I do this because I want to make it region free so I can play my various Japanese DS games on my really cool 2DS XL. And then that got me into like, wow, God, I wish my PS2 looked good on my CRT. And then that got me into spending $1,000 on new SCART cables, a new SCART switcher. I'm thinking about buying a Sega Saturn. I'm completely upgrading my retro setup. I'm buying all these games, and I just spent $800 on an analog NT Mini Noir that was given to us by friend of the podcast and loyal listener TJ, who's apparently been listening since the days of Active Time Babel.
Wow,
thank you so much, TJ. We met at the Experience Share. I'm wearing the Experience Share shirt right now. And very graciously allowed me to buy it for about $800, which is very expensive. But it's a $300 markup on the MSRP for an analog mini. But if you go on eBay right now, they're like $1,200, especially, and this one's sealed. So big thank you, TJ. It's huge help. It's so funny. Just on a whim, I checked Craigslist, and I see that there's one listing in the Bay Area in Alameda, where I live. And I contacted him like, hey, is this still available? And he's like, yeah. And by the way, I ran into you on Park Street. I was walking down Park Street, which is Alameda's main thoroughfare. And this guy walks up to me. He's like, hey, I think I like your podcast. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Big appreciation. And then he's like, by the way, it's the guy that I ran into in Park. It's a small world. It's crazy.
Alameda's apparently a small world.
So,
it is. Yeah.
So we're all going down the rabbit hole of retro then. This is where this pod is going.
I can't afford that stuff. I can barely pay my rent. You guys are paying $800 for monitors.
$800.
I'm not doing that much. Hold on. I'm not doing that much. But I was looking at a Mister for our retro streams because at some point we will stop doing just SNES stuff. And so I was like, maybe I get a PS Classic and I mod that a little bit. But like at that point, what am I doing? Like just go get a Mister and set that up. And so that might be a thing that happens. Did you get a Mister? I have not gotten one yet. I've been looking.
They were on sale a while ago.
This is my process. Is like I think I should get something, and then I just spend like a month or two just being like, but what if I got this? But maybe I should.
And then you just look at the sale store page, and you watch video reviews of it, and then your mouse hovers over the buy button, and you're like, should I buy this? You put it in the cart,
but you leave it in the cart for like a really long time. Yeah.
I'm thinking about getting a Saturn. I've never owned a Saturn. I'm weirdly interested in the 32-bit era these days. And I'm like, I could play Panzer Dragoon 2 Spy and Dragon Force and Cotton 2 and various old fighting games. I would be stupid not to buy a Sega Saturn. And then the question that comes into my head is like, but then if I buy a RetroTink 4K upscaler, I can put it in 4K and play Sega Rally on my big TV. And I'm like, should I put it on my CRT or should I put it on the big TV? I don't know what I'm doing. But right now, I'm actually low-key talking myself into buying a RetroTink 4K, which is like another few $100s. They're not cheap.
You're in the hole now. And look, I'm not going to be the one who reaches down to pull you out, because the problem is it's like, when you rescue a drowning person, they could pull you in. I'm afraid that if I try to help you out, you're going to pull me in too. So all I'm going to say is go with God and go with the blood god specifically. The funny thing is, a few months ago, I was like, I should just sell all these retro games. I mean, I got my Analog Pocket. I've got various subscriptions on NSO. I'm pretty good in terms of, I've got a lot of ROMs for my Steam Deck of old games. Fine. And now I'm in my brain of going, I think it was triggered by the Analog 3D, because the Analog 3D pre-orders went up. I pre-ordered it immediately because I want to play Star Fox 64 in 4K. I started buying boxed copies of N64 games, and I'm doomed. It's over. Yeah. So thank you to everybody. Your Patreon dollars are going to a really good cause.
My rent.
You are actively making this worse. Good job, everyone.
Help new Patreon tier. Help Kat buy a RetroTink 4K. I promise that I'll talk.
This is all actually a secretly like elaborate plan for Kat to get out of playing Final Fantasy 14. She's like, oh, if I keep talking about retro stuff on the pod and how much retro stuff I'm doing, they'll never ask me about FF14. I remembered.
That's the other funny thing. I'm buying all these games, and there's a part of me that's going, well, you got all these games on your Steam, and you haven't played Echoes of Wisdom yet, and also, what the heck are you doing, Kat? And I'm like, I don't know. All I know is that I want to buy a Sega Saturn and play X-Men versus Street Fighter. You don't even like fighting games, Kat. I don't care.
Oh, you like fighting games. We play like fighting games all the time. Yeah, no, it's...
Yeah, I like them a lot.
There should be a German word for this, because I do get this where I have a bunch of new games I should be playing, and then I'm like, but what if I like just downloaded Ace Combat 4 and played that? Is that something I did in the last week? Possibly. Does Ace Combat 4 still rip? Yes, it does. It does hold up. So, now we know that for science, and that's important.
Not to get dark, it's kind of a rough time in general in the world. I turn on social media and I get really stressed out and unhappy. I get really stressed out and unhappy about the state of the discourse around video games. And there's just something really comforting. Somebody logged off on the chat just immediately. No, I promise I wasn't getting dark. That dark. And there's just something really comforting about specifically sprite-based 32-bit games, sprite-based 32-bit arcade games with the really old school, primitive polygon graphics. I've come to love the polygons, the old school polygons, or whatever the heck they are in the Saturn. They're not polygons, or something else.
Quadroclons, I don't know.
Tetrahedrons,
like quadrilaterals or something.
This will be easy.
It's just a simpler time, and that's what nostalgia is, I guess. But Nadia, what have you been playing?
I think I'm getting into the end game for Metaphor. It is just so freaking good. I got
the bat. The little bat guy.
I love Heisme. I ranted about bats last time.
I love the Heisme. He's so wonderful. Oh my god.
He's great as an assassin. Like, holy crap. And
I believe it, yeah.
Pretty good too. That's what I really like about the game is that Persona, like, you couldn't really mess around too much with your character's builds, especially like your party members. But you can really just Final Fantasy V the hell out of this game.
Yes.
And they make it really easy too by giving you a bunch of items that you can use to immediately boost your character's experience, their job experience. So you're not like wasting too much time grinding. But even if you grind, it's a fun game because the battle system's always interesting. You can really still get messed up by a minor enemy if you are caught with your guard down. And it's just like, as much as I love Persona 5, like, this is just such a better experience. I'm kind of sad that it's coming to an end because, again, I think I'm in the last third of the game. You can just tell.
What city are you in? Can you tell me that? I can tell you, like, how far into the game you are.
I just went back to do a duel with a certain someone, and things happened story-wise, so I went to a place that is hidden.
Yes, okay, yeah, you are, like, nearing the end game portion then. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought there are a couple points in that game where it feels like you're going towards a final battle, and the game is very much like, oh no, we still have another act to go after this. And, like, yeah, so, but you are actually, like, approaching what I would say is, like, the final section of the game. It's still a meaty section, but it's a section.
Yeah, like, I know, you can kind of tell. Like,
the last character. Oh, I love the last. I'm not saying shit, but I love that last character so much. Oh,
but I love the fact that, like, I look at his, his portrait for skills and stuff like that, and he has the stupidest look on his face, just like.
I'm not saying a single revealing detail, but I love that character so much.
That character is really great.
So good,
yeah, absolutely. Just a great game. Like, just feels so much more
wonderful game.
Put together, an adult, and
yes,
great. I like
much more sophisticated than Persona. I think
it is a little more sophisticated for sure. And I mean, I'm not like, I'm artsy fartsy. Just like it tells a story like an adult, and that's really what I want out of a video game these days.
It has a surprising focus for how big of an RPG it is, but like everything it's doing feels like it is working in concert, and I think that's like incredibly impressive because, like, I love Persona, but like Persona has a lot of extraneous stuff, I would say, or even like you can end up doing things that are kind of like quote unquote wastes of time. And that can be meaningful sometimes, but I'm impressed by the ways that even when you do something that is not maybe the most maximized way of using your time in metaphor, it still ends up being meaningful in the process. Like you get something out of it, and also it ends up feeding into the story, into the themes, into anything. Like there's so much little stuff that I think the writing is just so incredible, and moving the framing away from being in high school, I think really does do a lot for this game, not just in terms of like taking out some of the weird parts of Persona, but also like giving them a lot more freedom with how they can write their characters. Like I don't think you would have a Heisme as a party member in a Persona game. Like you don't really have those characters. But like Heisme is like legitimately one of the best party members that Atlas has ever made. His story is so good. His story is
great.
Great voice acting too. Oh my gosh.
Oh, Power of Kings.
Power of Kings. She says something I love about like you dare to go up against the UG's agility?
Yeah, we had a little get together, some friends and I last weekend, and there might have been some shots where we downed it and said some Daka Ots and then put them back.
Daka Ots.
Some Daka Ots.
I love all the characters. They just all have like good, meaningful stories. Like I can't even remember the name of the summoner character, but I'm doing their side story, and that's just like really interesting.
Yeah. Every party member in that game is a hit, not a single miss in that party. I would say. And God, just what a game! Like I keep coming back to it. Like it's honestly such an impressive game that I think now it was a case of like, oh well, maybe this tees up Persona 6, and now I'm like, Persona 6 is going to have to live up to this. Like it's going to have to contend.
The bar's
with this.
Been raised.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's really impressive.
Good luck. Yeah, I feel very blessed by a lot of amazing RPGs. It's almost like holding multiple ice cream cones, and I'm just going, oh, metaphor, yeah, this is great. Oh, Persona 3 Reload, okay, yeah. It's just really, really magical time, I think. We truly are in RPG Renaissance. I've said that like 5 times. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. RPG
roll the R,
listeners. Yeah. Eric, what you got?
Last night I finished Emio the Smiling Man, the Nintendo game.
Low-key one of the better games of this year, right?
By that I mean I rolled the credits, and then something happened, and then I played the epilogue. And let me tell you, originally when I was playing this game, I was like, wow, this is surprisingly like mature game that Nintendo, has here. It's dealing with a lot of topics of like, oh, there's like a bar owner who hates cops because cops mistreated her in the past. And I was like, that's really bold of Nintendo to have something like that in here. That's really cool. And then the epilogue happens and you're like, Nintendo made this game? What the hell? There's some wild shit that happens in the epilogue that is like amazing. And it does a lot of stuff. I think if you like Paranormasight from last year, you will really like Emio, the Smiling Man, because it pulls some of those kinds of little tricks that I really like when an adventure game specifically like pulls a little trick and makes you go like, oh, clever, a lot of clever moments. But I think Emio is, I don't, it's not like my game of the year or anything. It'll probably make my list. I think it's been a pretty good year for adventure games and visual novels and narrative games in general. Tsukihime is also, I need to finish that one as well. But like, I think I'm overall just, I really want the team that made Emio to get more money to make more stuff like that, because it feels so different from everything else that's out there. And I put this on Blue Sky, which is where I'm spending most of my time now because X is a hellhole. And I, even if there are like rough edges to Emio, I do have like some issues with it. I think it's kind of a bummer that Ayumi, the girl detective who has been in some of the other Famicom Detective Club games, kind of spends most of that game dealing with an annoying character who has a crush on her and doesn't really get to do a lot of like the detective stuff that your main character gets to do when you play as her. But like, I still just want them to make more games like that, because there's not a ton out there like that, and I just want to see more of this. It's refreshing, it's interesting, it's neat. I love that games like this, games like Paranormasight, can exist and be made with like a modern production sensibility. I don't know what switch got flipped that suddenly like publishers are going, oh yeah, like we'll let teams make a budget sized 12 to 15 hour adventure game, have at it. But I love that that's happening, that's getting made. So I think if you want something different from Nintendo that also feels really at home on the Switch, really at home on the Switch, Emio is fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. And then I played Mario Party Jamboree is the other Switch thing I played a bunch of.
Everybody's been talking about that at IGN. It's selling really well, apparently.
Mm-hmm. I can understand, yeah.
I wrote about it in a freelance review for Polygon.com, since your boy is on the freelance game again.
Nice.
And my takeaway is that I don't think this is going to change hearts and minds completely, but I think if you were ever wanting to play a Mario Party that was not just Mario Party, this is like the one to play. Like if you have friends who are like, I don't want to play the Chaos Mario Party game, bring it to their house, and you've got a bunch of like co-op modes, like the Bowser Kaboom thing and the Rhythm Kitchen, which is kind of like just a fun co-op motion game. It feels like there were some like scattershot 1-2 Switch games that never got made that they just kind of put into Mario Party with like Mario set dressing. But then the actual boards are really good. The actual like mechanics feel solid. I've been playing it like post review, which is always kind of a weird thing, but like a good gauge on whether it actually sticks or not. I've still been playing it multiple times post review and having like a really good time with it. I think it facilitates good Mario Party stuff. Like it has a good format for you to have some Mario Party fun in. It's still chaos. It's still like all kinds of randomness and stuff, but I think where Super Mario Party was very innovative but divisive and kind of dropped the ball on the boards, and then Mario Party Superstars was overly nostalgic, in my opinion, like just wanted to rekindle the good days. This feels like in my opinion, like best Mario Party you could play on the Switch right now, and it's a good way to kind of send off this series because it has had a good run on the Switch, I think, so it feels like a good way to send the series off. Make it sound like it's dying
or something. Goodbye, Mario Party. This is
Mario Party.
Well,
it's too bad it never took off.
It is probably the last Mario Party we're going to see on the Nintendo Switch because there's going to be a new Switch around the corner, and we'll probably get a Mario Party there. But I think this is a fitting send-off for what's been an interesting run of this series on the Switch, specifically.
For Mario Party on the Switch.
Yeah, salute. So yeah, no, it's been a fun time. I've been playing a lot of Switch lately because I've been traveling and stuff, but also, I don't know, maybe I am feeling kind of, like we're on the verge of sending the Switch off, so I kind of want to get my last Switch playtime in before we eventually find out whatever is next for Nintendo. I've even been thinking about playing Breath of the Wild again because I was like, that game was just different. It was just a moment that I would love to try and recapture. So yeah, good times.
We're scenes when it's this time next year and it's like, I think that we're definitely getting a Switch 2 reveal next week. It's happening.
Is the
2025 November 2025? Country's on fire, but we are getting the Switch 2 reveal. I've heard from my sources on Family boards.
So next week, you're saying it's going to be the week.
No, we're making a joke.
Yeah, that's the joke.
Yeah,
that's the joke.
Yeah.
Too bad you had me excited there for a minute.
No, I'm more like a Switch 2 is gonna happen at some point. Like odds are that it's going to happen more than it's not going to happen.
It's up year on year in Japan. Sales are up year on year.
I know, but
people are buying more of the things.
Look, all I'm saying is, this is not me saying that some Switch 2 reveal is imminent. I'm just saying that we are likely closer to the end of the Switch's life cycle than the beginning. And I'm feeling rosily nostalgic about the run that the Switch has had, because I do think that like the Switch, when we look back on it years from now, is going to be like a major turning point in the industry. I think it was like maybe one of these most impactful consoles.
2017 maybe this is a whole other podcast, I think was the most important year of the modern era.
Oh,
so much started that year. And it was also the first year that I was running US Gamer. I think about that a lot too.
F and chat.
It was the year I got into games media.
F and chat. Okay, that's it for the tavern. Nadia, take us home.
So, it's Halloween, despite the weather kind of being not Halloweenish over here. I was thinking about the Halloweens I did as a kid, and I wanted to like ask you, what is the weirdest thing you ever got as a Halloween treat? Personally, I got the toothbrush from, the inevitable toothbrush from some asshole dentist. My mom was really mad about that someone gave me a toothbrush.
My God.
But yeah, when I think about it, my Halloweens have been kind of normal because my mom usually escorted us, me and my friends, so we didn't get into too much trouble. When I was 4, though, and this is a passage I wrote in my upcoming book, Cough Cough, From Pixels to Prose, I was thinking about how when I was, 4, for some reason, I had a costume of the Dungeon Master from the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and this was the 80s, so it was like one of those horrible vinyl aprons that had just a picture of the Dungeons and Dragons crew on the front, and the mask of the Dungeon Master, who was like this squat little man, and it's like, Mom, I don't want to be this horrible thing for Halloween. Well, get dressed, or you're not going out trick-or-treating, whatever. And the really great thing about these costumes is that, they were so dangerous. Even by the time I was 5, the cops and teachers and everyone were saying, please don't put your kids in these worryingly flammable aprons with the things that they can't see out of. And yeah, I hated those masks. You can't see a damn thing out of it. But if I wanted candy, I had to go be the Dungeon Master because my mom said so. But anyway, yeah, so I got a toothbrush one year. I got a pack of Old Maid cards for some reason.
Yes, yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about, the little things. And those are cool. I actually like those. My friends and I played Old Maid and, bet on candy. We somehow inserted that mechanic in there somewhere. God bless the people who gave you full candy bars or chocolate bars. Those were always good people.
And Canadian candy's better than American candy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I try not to do the smug Canadian thing too often, but dear God,
American candy's terrible.
American Kit Kat,
from Sour Patch Kids, yeah.
American Kit Kat. I was just like, I can't even finish this. It was so horrible. But yeah, free candy is free candy. So that always makes it taste better. Since I still live in a Russian area, I got those lobster candies that have the picture of the lobster on them. Look them up. I don't know why they're so popular over there. They taste all right. Of course, you always get the weird person who's probably a witch who gives you an apple, and you can't eat that because it's probably a razor blade
blades
in there, even though there never was. I hate
1980s urban miss.
And now they say, oh, that they're giving out edibles. Who the frick is giving out edibles? You know
who's giving out the good edibles to random people? That's crazy.
Why would I give out edibles to children? They cost a lot of money, and they're not for you. They're for me. I need them more than you, child. Trust me. You can be satisfied with regular candy. You can be happy with regular candy. I'm an adult.
Yeah, they don't need that. They're kids. They still have whimsy. We need the weed.
Oh, whimsy. Yeah, we need the weed. Stop.
We've seen more of the world.
So yeah, that's have you ever okay, so Eric, you grew up in Christland. Did you get the chick tracts?
I have seen a chick tract. I have not been given one as a Halloween thing, no, but I am aware of them.
I thought that was the stereotype. You all got
no, I wasn't.
Halloween candy.
Not that deep in the. I mean, Austin's not that deep in the Bible Belt.
Oh, okay, so that's kind of more, probably a little more liberal.
Yeah, maybe if I was
areas.
in a rural area or even in it even depends parts of downtown depend on where you go. But no, most of the stuff I got around here was candy. There was always talk of where the good bars are, where the houses they're giving out the bars. You go up to the richer neighborhoods and they're going to be giving out the good stuff. That Bob's Burgers episode, very accurate. You want to try and find the place that's handing out full bars. But I don't know. Halloween was always just a time of hanging out, walking up and down the street, getting candy. Wearing a Halloween costume that you thought looked really cool, but then just ended up being uncomfortable and difficult to wear. I was Goku one year. Wait, was that Goku or was it Vegeta? I think I was Vegeta actually because I had the Saiyan.
Someone with spiky hair.
I had the Saiyan armor and stuff.
Right, so that would be Vegeta.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one year, my brother. Sorry, we walked past someone who was dressed as a Game Boy. They had like the box,
Oh,
and they
that's
had like silver.
sick.
It was really good. And my brother, being an asshole, runs up to the kid and starts punching the buttons.
Yeah.
My mom's like, "Stop it."
This might be my own nostalgia pit, but there was a year where one of my uncles got us kids in the family. I say us kids, but we were like, I was probably 20 at the time. My brother was like 18 or whatever.
Yeah.
Got us all like these novelty shirts that they had found. They always sent us like fun gifts like that. And mine was like a guitar that you could like strum the strings on the shirt and it would make noise.
Nice.
My brother got a drum kit. And so if you hit the pads, it made drum noises. Now, here's the thing you need to understand is that no matter what age I am, if I can punch my brother to make drum noises, I'm going to punch my brother to make drum noises.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that entire Christmas devolved into us hitting my brother in the chest to make drum noises. And you would just be walking, like people would be cooking and stuff like that. We'd be having holiday cheer. You just hear like boom, 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 boom. Ah.
That's what the birth of Christ is all about. That was a little drummer boy, you know? That's what you're celebrating.
Yeah. And the
Baby Jesus. The
best moment was when we were like, okay, we've all had our fun. And then my grandma just open palm slams my brother right in the sternum to make the big bass drum noise, and we were all just dying laughing. It was hilarious.
The final blow.
Yeah,
the end of the world.
Yeah, that drum shirt's it lives in infamy in my family. So
that's pretty cool. I like the sound of that.
You can't wear a costume that has some sort of like interactable object on it and not be ready for people to like push the buttons or hit the drum pad.
No, absolutely.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of Axe of the Blood God. Thank you so much for listening for a very enjoyable episode, I have to say. If you enjoy the show and you want us to be able to continue to do it, support us on Patreon. Support my terrible, terrible retro gaming addiction. Patreon.com/BloodGodPod. We've been doing this podcast for about 3 years now, almost 4. And still going strong thanks to supporters like you. You can look forward to next week. We're going to be doing the Dragon Age the Veilguard review. We're going to be doing a Pantheon vote Muso game. It's going to be very fun. Really looking forward to that. And in the meantime, we're heading into the Axe of the Blood God post show with our loyal Stars of Destiny. And this week we're joined by Anthrax Bees, Criminal Justice, Drew RWX, Flashback 2012, Harvest Lunatic, Laguna Matata 124, and Robo Riley. Thank you so much to all of you, and thanks one more time to TJ for hooking me up with an Analog NT Mini Noir. We'll be back next week for more RPG action. I've been your host, Kat Bailey, and until then, for Nadia, Eric, myself, thanks for listening. And happy adventuring.